So we have now a second round table of the young researchers. We will have until 12:45, so we will make our lunch a little bit later, so we have 45 minutes. And we will do the same kind of dynamic than we did yesterday. We have 4 people because 2 of them will present a single project with 2 voices, but we shall see how we can move forward. So we will start with Lucia Campagnolo Martinez. She is a student at Comillas Pontifical University in Madrid, and she is following a double degree program in law and in international relationship. And she will say something about the distinction between therapies, healing, and enhancement. So the floor is yours, Lucia.
Okay,
go ahead.
So thank you really much. I want to thank first the organization for the opportunity of being here today and for encouraging young people to participate in this kind of events. I also want to thank everyone who's listening, and especially my teacher, Federico de Montalvo, who has helped me with all of this presentation. So, well, I'm going to talk about, as you know, the distinction between enhancement and healing regarding genome editing. So, the relationship between technology, medicine, and human beings involves many ethical considerations, as all of the experts here will be able to corroborate. And within this field, genome editing is by no means exempt from those considerations. So the fact that parents are actually able to genetically modify their children is something unique that has several ethical implications, to the extent that numerous international legal and bioethical texts tackle this issue from very different perspectives. So through this brief presentation, I will try to shed light on one of the most burning issues and topics in bioethics today, which is the distinction between genome editing for enhancement and for therapeutic purposes. So what parent wouldn't want their child to be the healthiest, best looking, and smartest? I think it's something natural and for every human being, and especially within the family, to seek the good, nay, the best in their offspring. So, but to what extent is it ethical for parents to be able to shape their child à la carte even before they are born? What implications can this have to the child and their offspring? Well, it is easy to understand that genome editing and genetic modification for saving your child's life, it's not the same as using it to improve and make your child more beautiful or more perfect, so to speak. However, even the line between these two concepts can be blurry sometimes, because it could be, for example, in children taking growth hormones, it could be argued that their parents' decision may have been either to cure a height deficit in the child, or maybe because just they wanted their child to be more taller. So, therefore, we can say that the difference between these two concepts is the existence of a disease or disability in the patient. So, if there is no medically recognizable disease that can be diagnosed in the patient, the intervention cannot be considered as a medical necessity, and therefore it should be labeled as enhancement. So, well, now that we have established the main dilemma that will serve us as our starting point, let us focus on the main 2 concepts and the arguments that support each one of the concepts. So first, as you all know, we can find genome editing for therapeutic purposes, which is defined as the use of biotechnological power to treat people with known diseases, disabilities, or handicaps in an attempt to restore them to a normal state of health and fitness. So, well, what parent wouldn't want for their child this kind of therapeutic interventions? Obviously, these interventions are always in the best interest of the child, and their main aim is to restore their health and preserve, obviously, their health-wise. So, even so, this issue is of such an importance that it has to meet rigorous standards and has to be subjected to some limits. For example, the German National Ethics Commission ethically justifies this kind of interventions with therapeutic purposes in the germline of individuals, meaning that it will affect their descendants too, provided that it is used in very specific therapeutic cases and that the parent's decision does not involve an instrumentalization of the child. So in a nutshell, such an intervention can only be accepted if it were indispensable and necessary to prevent the disease of the child. On the other side, we can find genome editing for enhancement purposes, and in this case, parents, according to their own canon, resort to biotechnology to improve or better their children. Well, can we consider these practices as ethical? To answer this question, we must ask ourselves whether we are free to have children or whether we have a right to have children, because as similar as this may seem, these two concepts are so different and there is a nuance. Because you know that being free to do something does not entail the same implications as having a right to do something. So if a right to procreation is legally recognized, limiting the parent's ability to shape and decide about their own child would be legally much more difficult. But while there is a right to reproduce, that is to make an autonomous choice about the intention to have offspring, technically speaking, there is no such thing as a right to have children. Firstly, because children are human beings endowed with inherent dignity and equal rights to their parents, and thus they cannot be treated as property or goods. And secondly, because the state cannot in any way guarantee or provide its citizens with an offspring. It's easy as that. So we could say that having children is therefore an exercise of freedom. And as you all know, John Stuart Mill reminds us that the freedom of individuals can be limited when its exercise affects a third party. And obviously, the genetic modification of parents into their child can fall into this category, as there is always a third party involved, which is the child in question. So, it is common and natural for every parent to want to have a healthy, a strong, and intelligent child. But as this is not morally objectionable, when this desire becomes a legal right that allows parents to interfere within the embryo, ethical considerations arise. And there are so many other examples of why we could say that it's morally objectionable to genome edit a child, an individual, for enhancement purposes. First one is every child's right to have an identity, which is recognized in the Universal Declaration of the Rights of the Child, and which could be violated if the parents were to alter their child's DNA to shape them into their own liking, and therefore preventing the child from developing its own identity. Following this line, as Jürgen Habermas points out, programmed people will no longer see themselves as the authors of their own biography and as persons of equal status, not limited in relation to previous generations. On the other side, the UNESCO Bioethics Committee, in its 2015 report on the human genome and human rights, points out that genome editing for enhancement purposes can violate the dignity of the individual and can lead to new forms of stigmatization and discrimination. This is so because we could ultimately reach a point in where people are going to be the object of discrimination merely because their parents could not afford to genome edit them. So, I think that we could explain the difference between these two concepts through the following example. A parental decision to authorize for plastic surgery in a child who has suffered from a facial malformation due, for example, to a traffic accident, it is hardly debatable as unethical, as it proves to be in the benefit of the child. But on the contrast, if the parents were to resort to this plastic surgery because they consider that their child does not meet certain canons of beauty, our ethical view would actually change. So all things considered, I feel that it is fair to say that the difference between genome editing for therapeutic and enhancement purposes lies primarily in the best interest of the child, their right to develop their own identity and to preserve their own dignity. And all of the experts and international conventions about this topic has shown us that while therapeutic editing aims for the maximum benefit of the child, editing for enhancement purposes aims to fulfill a wish of the parents, which in ethical terms is highly more questionable. So, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Lucia, for this very synthetic overview about a very controversial topic, but you gave us some criteria. Of course, there are many questions that are still open about what is better or improvement for who, or what is the perfection or imperfection that is constitutive of human condition. But of course, you did a very good try to put all things together. So thank you very much. Now we will give the word to Paweł Kodowczycki, something like that. He is an assistant professor at the Copernicus University in Poland. He has a PhD at the Free University of Berlin in veterinary medicine. And he also recently received an award at the Polish Minister of Science and Education for Young Outstanding Scientists. So now Paweł will talk about the ticking biological clock of oocytes, implications for procreation and society. So we're listening to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure and big honor to be here in this beautiful place. And today I would like to talk about reproductive aging, because aging itself, it's a topic every one of us is exposed to. Minute by minute, our chronicle age is advancing. And noteworthy, the female reproductive system is one of the first organ systems which fails with advancing age. What makes it so interesting to deal with if you really want to understand the phenomenon of aging? And when I look at my oocytes in the lab, it's a big magic at the beginning of a new life when you see when this forms to these beautiful embryos. So my talk is structured into 4 main pieces. In the beginning, I will just provide you with some background information and some definitions, then coming to the aims of our approach, and in the end, the results and the conclusions which we can draw out of them. So definitions are always good to make a clear situation, and some years ago, researchers introduced these so-called hallmarks of aging, and today I will especially concentrate on these 2 primary hallmarks of aging, namely telomeres and epigenetics. So, what are telomeres? Telomeres are repetitive tandem hexamers at the end of linear chromosomes, and together with proteins, they cap the chromosomes, and they somehow protect, and I always compare it to shoelaces, you know. In the beginning, the shoelaces, this plastic tip here in the end, looks very nice and fancy, and when the shoe gets older, this plastic thing at the end gets ugly and it's broken. So this is also happening to telomeres. With advancing age, we have telomere shortening. And now coming to the epigenetics, actually some years ago, some researchers introduced these epigenetic clocks, and this is an interdisciplinary approach, because here mathematics, biostatistics, molecular biology are all combined, because with this approach they try to calculate the biological age according to DNA methylation throughout the individual's genome. And it appears that somehow a person who has maybe a chronological age of, let's say, 60 years could have the biological age of 40 or the biological age of 70 or 80 according to lifestyle, diet, or other environmental factors. So now women, let's talk about oocytes. Women hoping to become pregnant are facing a ticking biological clock, since every mammalian female is born with a set of oocytes at the beginning of life. And when you see here on the left-hand side, in case of girls, they are born with approximately 1 million of oocytes in the ovary. And already at the onset of puberty, we have a reduction to 300,000, and then this number is reducing throughout life, reaching menopause. And with regards to, we don't have only reducing quantity, we also have a reducing quality in these oocytes, what is shown here on the right-hand side, because with advancing maternal age, we have a lower probability or chances of pregnancy. And this is also due to the quality of oocyte is decreasing, because if you imagine that this oocyte, which is there from the beginning of life and is waiting for 30, 40 years to be ovulated and be fertilized, is the possibility for a lot of environmental factors. So why do we care about reproductive aging? Because, as we have also heard in the previous talks, we have changing demographics. People tend to live longer, and there's also a tendency to postpone first pregnancy, what has been observed in the last 3 decades in most of the industrialized countries. And in most of the cases, IVF is then needed. So coming now to the ethics, you maybe all remember the big debate where Facebook and Apple offered the female employees to freeze their eggs, stay at the company, make the career first. And this raised also other ethical questions. For instance, it's what is shown here on the right-hand side in a German newspaper. Are companies allowed to plan or organize families? And another ethical question is, due to this terminology, social freezing, why the choice of women about reproductive life should be socially embedded. So this was also a big discussion during the time of social freezing, and it's still up to date, because we see in our IVF clinic that we are from year to year an increasing number of future parents which need the help of IVF. So, and on the background of all this, we try to discover, or maybe try to establish, a large animal model. In my case, I'm using cows. Why cows? Because cows and women have a lot of similarities. For example, with regards to reproduction, of course, the cleavage stages at the beginning of embryonic division are quite comparable. The blastocyst formation, the selection of follicles for the ovulation are quite similar. And also duration of pregnancy, both cows and women, approximately 9 months of pregnancy. And the way I aspirate my oocytes is also the same way how it is done in human medicine. So I do it with an ultrasound-guided approach by ovum pickup. And I can maybe refer to Jacob's talk. I always take care for the welfare. This is done under general anesthesia in vivo. So this is also a big advantage, that I don't have to use mice to euthanize them. I can do it in vivo under local anesthesia. So with regards to this animal welfare things. And then with the aspirated oocytes, they are immature. I mature them, and then we would like to measure the telomere length at the metaphase stage. So this is the stage when the oocyte is ready to be fertilized. And in the end, we would like to establish oocyte clock, that's how we called it, to estimate what is the real biological age of oocyte, and to maybe answer the question, or to evaluate if the bovine species is an appropriate large animal model for the human oocyte. So now coming to the results, just quickly. So here in the upper part of the left-hand side, you see the epigenome-wide association studies. And what you can see here, that in blue and red, there are different regions, hyper and hypomethylated, and they completely differ. So blood and oocytes, with regards to these epigenetic or hypo and hypomethylation regions, completely differ. And this is also shown here in the lower part on the left-hand side, that the location of CpG islands, which are hypo and hypermethylated, are different. But the good thing for us was then when we applied these epigenetic clocks here on the right-hand side in the upper part, the cattle blood oocyte clock, that was showing us that we have a high correlation. So meaning that with regards to epigenetic age, it's enough to take a blood sample and then to estimate the biological age of oocytes. And the next good information was that this pan-tissue clock, so meaning we could use it also for the human medicine, because we have a high correlation, as you can see here on the right-hand side, so it could be translational with regards to the human, for example, IVF clinic. Then I stained the telomeres in a metaphase 2 stage. Here you can see on the left-hand side is the oocyte, and when you zoom in, you see the chromosomes, and in the tip of the chromosomes, these red dots, these are the telomeres, approximately 2 nanometers. And then we measured the telomeres, and what we figured out that with advancing maternal age, so I used 3 different age groups in my cow, very young calves, so prepubertal cows, then cows at the middle age, and very old cows. And with advancing maternal age, we have a decrease in telomere length. But the good thing was that when we treat the oocytes with rapamycin, let's say an anti-aging compound, we could somehow protect our telomeres in the oocytes from the shortening. And then spindle assembly, I talked about the oocyte quality. So spindle assembly is, for example, important in advanced age women, which have, for example, not so good quality oocytes, and the chromosomes are not separating properly. So then we have problems like, for example, trisomy of chromosome 21, so the Down syndrome, or trisomy of the chromosome 18. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, treating oocytes with resveratrol, we could somehow improve this situation of spindle failure. So as you see here on the right-hand side, in the control groups, so with advancing maternal age, we had an increase in the percentage of spindle failure, what is shown in the green bars. And when you compare it to the blue bars, treating oocytes with resveratrol, somehow you could rejuvenate the oocyte in the way that the spindle failure was reduced. So it's also good information for us. Why? Because resveratrol is also, or was detected in red grapes and also in red wine. So drinking red wine is maybe protecting us from aging. So now coming to the conclusions, we can say that the donor age significantly affects telomere length in oocytes and metaphase oocytes, and also in the donor blood. So good information that we can use the blood sample in future, maybe in IVF clinics. Telomere length in metaphase 2 oocytes can be improved upon the treatment with resveratrol or rapamycin. And epigenetic clocks for oocytes are expected to address long-standing questions. And one central question here is how to slow down maybe aging in oocytes. And the last point is that cattle are, from my point of view, a very attractive model for fertility in women due to the high degree of similarity, and also due to the high, as we have shown in the epigenetic clocks, high degree of correlation. So, and I would like to end with a quote of my favorite Polish scientist. It's Marie Skłodowska-Curie, who was saying that nothing in life is to be feared, it's only to be understood, and now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Thank you for your attention, and you're really welcome to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Paul, Pavel. Of course, I think every one of us thought maybe is possible also a digital twin for as a model for studying telomeres and reproduction. But anyhow, it's very interesting the results you had from your research. Now we go to another presentation that will be a kind of a conjoint or project with 2 voices about always reproduction, but human reproduction. The 2 speakers will be Diego Puricelli, who is a diocesan priest. He has a Master of Science in Medical Biotechnology at the University of Padova. And he also has a license in theology at the Gregorian, where he's also studying for a doctorate in moral theology. So, and then you will be the second. So I will present you after. Go, Diego.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. The new biotechnologies are increasingly taking part in our life and culture. Sci-fi movies are an interesting example of that. Fears, uncertainties, hopes contained in these pop narratives allow a professional reader to contemplate the transformation of our culture, reflecting on the anthropological, legal, social, and ethical issues stemming from the biotechnological endeavor. Therefore, I'd like to start our speech sharing with you a very brief clip from a recent sci-fi movie, Blade Runner 2049. A sinister entrepreneur, Niander Wallace, is dealing with a newborn, or better to say, a new manufactured humanoid, a replicant, and he is complaining she's missing a crucial feature.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered. But I can only make so many. Tyrell's final trick. Procreation. Perfected, then lost. But there is a child. Bring it to me.
Sir.
In its vision of synthetic, fleshy replicants and its fetish that they can become fertile, Blade Runner 2039 makes visible a contemporary social fantasy of biology fully woven into capitalist production. Life itself is seen as simply another material to be engineered and commodified. The fetal position of the replicant body struggling for its first breath and covered in fluid underscores the conflation of biological reproduction with manufacture, destabilizing any firm boundary between human and non-human life, just as the engineering ethos that characterizes the field of synthetic biology blurs the distinction between living organism and inert thing. In the human procreation field, the new biotechnologies have been very disruptive. From the birth of the first test tube baby in 1978 up to the first pair of genetically modified twins in 2018, this step was relatively short. Today we are dealing with two new frontiers in human reproduction, the synthetic gametes and the artificial womb. How much we have to wait to have the first baby conceived with these techniques? I'd like to speculate a little bit with you about such a possible future scenario with a brief clip made by a multidisciplinary designer, Yvonne Hung.
This November marks the 10th anniversary of EVE in the UK. EVE stands for Ex Vivo Uterine Environment, the artificial external womb that carries a baby through the entire 9 months of gestation. To date, nearly 100,000 children in this country and 500,000 children worldwide have been born using EVE. Approximately half of these births also used IVG, or in vitro gametogenesis, the use of skin cells to make sperms and eggs.
Our clinic was the first in the world to provide IVG and EVE as a service. In 2042, we had our very first clients, Katie and Steve Greeley. Katie could not get pregnant naturally because she had endometrial cancer.
At that time, EVE was a huge controversy worldwide. While supporters argued it is a fundamental human right to procreate, regardless of your age, gender, health, or sexual orientation, protesters from religious and anti-gay communities argued that it is an act against God and nature.
Eventually, the public began to see the benefits of IVG and EVE, especially for those who can't get pregnant naturally. I would say about 80% of our clients are infertile, gay or older couples. Just over a decade ago, if these couples wanted a child of their own, they would have relied on an egg or sperm donor or a surrogate. So your baby might not even have your own genes, and you don't get to bond with your baby until after it's born. About 15% of our clients are actually traditional hetero couples of childbearing age. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen a lot more interest in these couples choosing IVG and EVE over natural birth.
Some of these couples have already tried natural birth for the first child and didn't want to go through that again. For others, EVE is just an easier option. They can smoke, drink, and work throughout the pregnancy and share the bonding experience and responsibility equally between mother and father. Since EVE is covered by the NHS in the UK, cost is not a factor for parents. However, in the US, the cost of EVE is about $10,000 per trial. Many companies such as Google and Apple now provide IVG and EVE as a benefit to employees of all genders.
I would say the biggest benefit of using IVG and EVE is that these technologies is 99%. It's only 91%.
Stoppato.
EVE allows doctor.
Okay. Okay. It's not working. The next. We have a problem. Okay, we've seen the video. So, after this brief video clip, let us go now a little bit deeper. While a complete critical appraisal of the ethical, anthropological, and legal aspects of these new technologies is obviously not possible in this context, we like to adopt a pedagogy of questioning. Before getting good answers, it's important to learn how to ask good questions. So the first one is related, I need the clip. Yeah, nothing. It's related to the classical dichotomy, natural and artificial. When we deal with a synthetic product, the vitamin C synthetic, for instance, or like in this case, a synthetic gametes, we are dealing with something identical to the natural counterpart, but achieved through the processes that characterize the artificial. So, are they natural or artificial? This kind of dichotomy we see is not working. Furthermore, in public discussion, the natural and the artificial are value-laden terms. Very often, in fact, they work as placeholders to convey a range of different values, beliefs, ideas, hopes, and anxieties. The risk to fall in a naturalistic fallacy or to take the yuck factor related to the unnatural as a moral guidance is always present. At the same time, saying that nothing is unnatural doesn't mean that everything is morally acceptable. So how could we do? Avoiding the problem, speaking of in vitro gametes instead of synthetic or artificial gametes, for instance, or searching for a new category because we're dealing with something radically new. Synthetic could be a new concept worthy to be explored.
Thank you, Diego. Now the presentation will continue with Emanuela Midolo. They are working together in Georgetown University as visiting researchers, and Emanuela has a master in law here in Rome at the LUMSA University, a PhD in bioethics, and she is also working in research fellow as a research fellow in the National Council of Research in Italy. So, Emanuela, you can continue this presentation about your specific topic.
Yes, thank you. So, I ask your attention now to the major of the ethical and anthropological problem of this new technology. In synthetic gametes, we have they introduce a conflation or expansion of genetic parental relationship, because we can find a solo parenthood, just same-sex reproduction, and also polyamorous. In artificial womb, the crucial ethical and anthropological question is the interruption of maternal and embryo relationship. Of course, the embryo is not just a passive, but is an active orchestra or is attachment and fate. So how Professor Palazzani affirmed, the interruption of this precious maternal and embryo relationship have several causes, not just for the embryo, so for the development, emotional and also psychological, but also for the mother, for the psychological and emotional health. We have to ask some question about that. So what is the moral difference between an intervention that is therapeutic, so it's for medical purpose, and between that act that is from social reason pushed? Also, could be the artificial womb a way to make free the woman from the yoke of pregnancy? There is a lot of feminists that affirm that this is the key for make women free of the maternity stereotype. Others affirm that this could take some violence from the men against the woman, because there is more expectative. Also, there is a concern about the harm to the children. How is safe this type of technologies? And which will be the risk also for the abandonment of the child? Why, if the child or the fetus doesn't match the desire of the parents? Also, there is equal access to this type of technology, and it's a cultural gold standard, so it's just for the benefit of the parents of the embryo or all the society, the pushed society. Okay, so in Italy there is some different position, because the some jurists argue that this is the key for pay attention to individual needs and desire. Others think that it's high the risk of the application of this new technology, so they pay attention, they draw the attention to the application of ethical principle of the research on humans and or the application of precautionary principle. The major juridical orientation, try to avoid the biological reductionism to the direction to the right to non-commercialization of human body, and also to the right to the unpiloted evolution of humans. All that without limiting the research, of course. So we have to ask, does this desire to have a child, a perfect child, represent a claiming of a right? Do reproductive right a prospective parents' exit, so they can decide if, when, and also how to reproduction of the gold baby with this technology? And what are the implications of this such claim on the transformation of the parenthood? Of course, as Professor Palazzani affirmed, the modern crisis in the concept of person that has directed the society in a certain anti-personalistic current that deny the existence and the knowability of the value of a person, the principle arguing to the boundaries of what is licit or not licit in biomedical technology that are technically possible on human life is related to the question of personal status, of course. So we have to ask, which is the legal status of a fetus that is growing outside of the natural woman womb? It will have a new right he will be a child or just a fetus or a patient? Or what the right from the parents also to kill or destroy the embryo that is not perfect? Or what about if the polyamorous couple just split up? Or if the couple divorce? What will happen about the fetus? Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela. Of course, you raised the major questions that are controversial in the discussion, the debate about human reproduction. Maybe we have a few minutes for one question or reaction for the public. Federico.
I think one of the problems that we have now, and is something is like a new culture, is the proper definition of health provided by the WHO. They try to give something in a holistic way, talking about health and wellness, and this is, I think, one of the problems. When we try to say healing and enhancement are different, perhaps one of the problems that wellness is now a proper concept included in the concept of health. So it opens a line to consider enhancement is related to health. I think it's one of the problems. So I think that we need to think about this definition of health, which is good on the one hand, but on the other opens a lot of very difficult doors, difficult questions. So perhaps let's work about this definition. So only one proposal related to two of the interventions that we have listened, wonderful ones.
Thank you. Kevin.
Thank you for the presentations. They were great, fascinating. So the thing that would be interesting to look at going forward is the issue that always arises in terms of how far you could go with the technology, right? So to save the life of the fetus, right? That would be, I presume, the case. So can you envision an argument that you would accept that would say, no, even saving the life of the fetus does not justify pursuing this kind of technology? Or are you just presuming that at some point we're going to have it, because that's what they're working on? I mean, not in cows necessarily right now, but sheep and goats and whatnot. We'll get the cows. So the technology will be there. So the question is there any way that you can see that someone's going to be able to say justifiably, no, you can't do that?
It's a very good question. This okay, I can say mine after I leave the place to Diego. From law, go more slow to the ethics and medics. So it's very difficult. But a lot of documents that I show in the slide in my presentation debate about the status, if it's a thing, if it's a product, or if we can donate to industry or something like that. I can remember the European Court for Human Rights in 2015. So Parillo against Italy just say, no, it's not a product, it's life. So we cannot destroy how we want. So of course there is a limit in which we cannot try to modify completely our needs. So this is my personal vision, of course, in personalistic view. If the person is in the center and the life starts with fecundation, so I cannot say that it is not true, and all the stage is the same for the embryo, the development, I cannot accept to just kill or destroy or modify in my need, so choice the eyes, or it's eugenetic. So there is some limits that law and ethics especially need to pose to this technology. Of course, I hope that the research will go more, on, but we need to take the research in the limits of ethics and of rights of all, as you said before.
Yeah, nothing to add. I agree.
Someone want to add something? Nobody dares. Okay. Yeah, last questions. Last question.
Thank you for very interesting and wonderful presentations. As a non-young ethicist, I am hopeful if I heard these wonderful presentations. So we spoke or discussed about also the definition of WHO, the health, and if we look that we cannot imagine that the aging or old situation is not a disease, and therefore for my question is to Dr. Kordovitsky. So you invest in this research time, money, and as you said, it's for narcos, but on the other side, there is a suffering of the animals and so on. And as we say, so old age is not a disease. So I'm interested in your personal opinion. Why are you doing research to slow down aging? However, it's not a disease.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is not only to slow down aging, but with extending the lifespan, also taking care for the health span. But this is only one, let's say, the first idea. If you try to how to intervene the aging process with maybe these compounds, so adding resveratrol or rapamycin to your personal or own diet. So this is one point. So then we can maybe have people living 100 or 110 years, 120 years. But I think the important is also thing is that we should keep also these individuals healthy. So and these are unsolved questions, and with regards to epigenetics, we still do not know why in some persons we have aging, accelerated aging, so they age very fast, although they have maybe good genes, but due to their lifestyle they're not like in the biological age compared to their chronological age. So yeah, and I think it's still a lot of open questions, and my personal interest in aging is that, or especially in reproductive aging, is that really this is the first organ system which shows symptoms of aging. And if we understand this first organ system, we can maybe extrapolate or translational approach for other organ systems. If we know why it's happening so early, when we know the mechanisms, then we can maybe transfer to other organ systems. And yeah, this is my personal view. That's why I'm so interested in aging, or especially in oocyte aging. Yeah.
I'm afraid we are completely out of time, but so I think we have to stop now.